When Alison Montgomery burst into her uncle's study with a knife in her hand, he didn't even look up from his papers. "You knew," she hissed, trembling with rage and tears. "You knew she was dying. And you still wouldn't let me see her." Richard Delmar set his pen down. Slowly, calmly, as if his life weren't hanging by a thread. "Put the knife down, Alison. We both know you're not a killer." "You don't know me," she whispered, but her hand already wavered. "I slept in my car for a month. A whole month. And you sat here in this mansion, signing documents, erasing the last traces of her." He stood, tall, sharp, silver at the temples, with a gaze that could freeze boardroom veterans. But Alison didn't flinch. "You stole my goodbye," she said, her voice no longer weak, but ice cold. "You took everything from me. But today, you made a mistake." He frowned. "What mistake?" "You gave me a reason to come back." It had started a year earlier, in May, inside a Beverly Hills estate so polished it felt like a museum. Alison had been living in Austin then, teaching history at a community college, scraping by on tutoring gigs and selling old books. She wasn't drowning in debt, but luxury was a distant memory. Her mother, Claire Montgomery, had been the younger sister of Richard Delmar, founder of DLM Capital, one of the West Coast's most formidable investment firms. But Claire had chosen a different path. She left the world of billionaires, married a music teacher, and raised her daughter far from charity galas and private jets. Richard considered it a betrayal. They hadn't spoken in nearly 20 years, until Claire called Alison at 3 a.m. and said, "I don't have long. And he's trying to take everything again." Alison flew to Los Angeles the next day. But the estate gates were locked. Security wouldn't let her through. "Mr. Delmar has prohibited all visits," one guard said, avoiding her eyes. She called, emailed, begged, no reply. 10 days later, a letter arrived from a notary. Claire Montgomery had passed. The funeral had already happened, without her. The will had been contested before Alison even saw it. And a month after that, an official notice arrived from DLM's legal team. "Due to lack of verifiable kinship and suspected fraud, you have been excluded from the list of heirs." Alison didn't cry. She burned every photo of her mother. Then she opened her laptop and began to dig. The Delmar fortune wasn't built on smart investments alone. As Alison discovered, a third of their wealth came from real estate acquired through shell companies. There were offshore accounts, tax dodges, and inheritance disputes. In the past 15 years, Richard had legally stripped 3 distant relatives of their inheritance. 2 suddenly faced criminal investigations. The third went bankrupt overnight. Alison understood. He wasn't just greedy. He systematically eliminated anyone who could claim a piece of his empire. And now it was her turn. But she wasn't going to disappear. She quit her job, sold her car, and moved to Long Beach under a fake name. By day, she waited tables at a roadside diner, staying invisible. By night, she scoured archives, board meeting transcripts, court records, tax filings. She found Arthur Pence, a former DLM accountant fired after refusing to sign falsified reports. "He controls everything he can't destroy," Arthur said, clutching a coffee cup with shaking hands. "But there's one thing he can't erase: Claire's original will. It's locked in her personal attorney's safe, not the one Richard hired. She left a copy with me." Alison could barely breathe. "Where is it?" "In a private bank vault. But access requires biometrics or consent from a first-line heir." "That's me. You'll have to prove it in court. And Richard's already bought off half the lawyers in the county." Alison paused. Then asked softly, "What if the first-line heir shows up in person?" Arthur stared at her like she was a ghost. "You're planning to break in?" "No," she smiled. "I'm going to make him invite me himself." The plan was insane. But she had no other choice. She forged documents, creating a fake firm specializing in historical artifact restoration, hired an actress to pose as her assistant, and sent Richard a letter, supposedly from the American Heritage Foundation, claiming they'd discovered Claire's private archive, diaries, letters, photos, and wanted to return it to the family. Richard replied in 3 days. Meeting set at the estate. No security. Just his personal attorney. Alison stepped into that house for the first time in 20 years. Everything was intact: ancestral portraits, antique clocks, hand-woven rugs. Even the scent beeswax, lemon, and cold marble. "Where's the archive?" Richard demanded, barely containing his impatience. "First, prove you're the sole heir," Alison said, locking eyes with him. "We can't release private property without verified lineage." He smirked. "You're not from any foundation, are you?" "No. But the archive is real. And it contains something you never want the IRS to see." His expression shifted. He told his attorney to wait outside. "What do you want?" "Everything that belonged to my mother. Her will. Her room. Her name in this family's history." "You have no right." "Then the archive goes to the press, including the recording where you ordered her name removed from the clinic memorial." He fell silent, for the first time afraid. "Fine," he said quietly. "Send your lawyers tomorrow. I'll return what I can." "Not what you can," she whispered. "Only what you haven't stolen yet." She received a Palm Springs estate, a Swiss bank account, and a collection of paintings, the scraps Richard hadn't managed to liquidate. But the real prize was the original will. In it, her mother didn't just leave her assets, she granted her voting rights in the family's charitable foundation. Alison didn't seek public revenge. She joined the foundation's board. At her first meeting, she proposed radical reforms: all votes public, all financial reports transparent, all heirs equal. Richard didn't object. He knew she was in the game to stay. But the true vengeance came later. 6 months in, the foundation transferred $2 million to a music teacher support program. A year later, it launched the Claire Montgomery Scholarship for students from low-income families. 2 years after that, it began an internal investigation into DLM Capital's financial practices. Richard didn't lose money. He lost control. And Alison stood at the window of the foundation's new office, watching the sunset. In her hand, the final letter from her mother. "Revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's becoming the person they fear most." She smiled and placed the letter in the safe, next to the knife she'd carried into his study. "Just in case."